One of the most interesting maps I've come across recently is this map of Romance languages. That is to say, languages descended from Latin, the language of the Romans in Europe. Of course, most people know about Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and French. Many people outside of these nations speak these languages thanks to centuries of colonialization. But off in the east of Europe, isolated from the other Romance languages, is Romanian. Many people don't even know that Romanian is a Romance language. If you were to ask most Americans, they'd probably guess it's similar to Russian or something. Of course, Americans are not often the most reliable source.
Where is Ukraine on a map? Right here?
But still, this map raises the question: how come Romanian is the only Romance language in Eastern Europe? Before anyone in modern-day Romania spoke Latin, this area of Europe was called Dacia. Dacia was inhabited by a mix of indigenous tribes, most notably the Dacians, who were a Thracian people. Thrace was a region which encompassed parts of modern-day Bulgaria, Greece, and Turkey. The Dacian language was within the Thracian branch of the Indo-European language family. Very little is known about the Thracian languages, as they did not leave behind written records. This means that most of what we know about Thrace comes from Greek writers. For example, Herodotus mentions Zalmoxis, a chief god among a polytheistic pantheon. This is one of the most prominent Thracian words that was recorded anciently. Dacia was known for its rich natural resources, including gold, silver, iron, and salt, which were mined and traded by the Dacians. This area is still mined today for these resources. The Dacians were organized into tribes led by chieftains and had a decentralized political system. Despite this, the Dacians were able to unite under strong leaders at various times, most notably under King Barabista in the 1st century BC. Meanwhile, a city in the Italian peninsula was gathering more and more power throughout the Mediterranean, and it would soon change Dacia forever. The Roman Republic, and later the Roman Empire, tended to grow through a kind of aggressive defense. Instead of outright naked expansionism, the Romans would usually invade and annex new regions on the periphery of existing Roman lands under the pretext of protecting the already existing borders from attack. These expansions would in turn provide the Romans plenty of natural resources and slaves, fueling the Roman economy. In Dacia, it was no different. In 101 AD, Roman Emperor Trajan invaded Dacia to put an end to the barbarian threat north of the Danube. Over the course of 2 separate military campaigns, the Roman army was able to overcome the Dacian resistance and capture key strongholds. The siege of Sarmizegetusa, The siege of Sarmizegetusa, the capital of Dacia, was particularly decisive, leading to the eventual surrender of the Dacian king Decebalus in 106 AD. This gave Rome access to the rich deposits of the natural resources mentioned earlier, particularly gold mines, as well as hundreds of thousands of slaves. After the conquest, Trajan initiated a program of Romanization in Dacia, promoting the use of Latin language and culture. This effort was facilitated by the construction of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects, which helped integrate Dacia into the broader Roman Empire. In fact, Dacia was one of the most heavily colonized regions of the entire Roman Empire. An unusually high number of Roman soldiers were brought into the region. Many Roman administrators were also brought into Dacia to consolidate control of the region, and many veterans received land in Dacia at the end of their service. This had the effect of making Vulgar Latin, that is, the Latin spoken by the common people, the dominant language in Dacia, and this happened quite quickly. This does not mean that the Dacian people properly assimilated into Rome necessarily. They were still quite resentful of this occupation, but Latin became widespread in this region nonetheless. After around 170 years, however, the Roman Empire had receded from its high water mark. During the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome's eastern and western provinces fell into revolt. Germanic armies invaded Roman territory, plague was widespread, and the Roman economy was collapsing. Under these auspices, Emperor Aurelian assumed the throne in 270 AD. Aurelian's efforts to save the Roman Empire are legendary. He almost single-handedly managed to restore the empire to a point where it would continue for centuries more. Aurelian's restoration of the empire is beyond the scope of this video, but importantly for Dacia, he decided to pull Roman forces back and move the Roman border to the Danube River, consolidating Roman territory and making it easier to defend against invasions and incursions. This gave Dacia independence again after nearly 2 centuries of occupation. In 395 AD, the Roman Empire split into East and West. The Western Empire would not survive the next century, and the traditional date for the collapse of the Western Roman Empire is 476 AD. As we know, Latin was spoken throughout the Western Roman Empire, and it evolved through the centuries into the languages we know today in France, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. But the Eastern Roman Empire continued until Constantinople was finally taken by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. So why don't the former Eastern Roman territories speak Romance languages? Why is Romanian the only major Romance language spoken east of Italy. Determining the exact causes of language development is of course subject to some speculation, and language development is influenced purely by chance to some degree. That said, we have a fairly good idea of what happened to the Latin-speaking populations here between the fall of Rome and the modern day. In most of the Eastern Roman Empire, Latin was not the vernacular, although it was the administrative language. In other words, documents and other government-related records were written in Latin, but were you to stroll through the streets of Constantinople, you would hear Greek. Going north into the Balkans, this would give way to more Latin speakers. In 1911, Czech historian Konstantin Jireček drew a line across the Balkan Peninsula, denoting the historical areas of Latin influence and Greek influence. This is called the Jireček line. It's been revised several times since he drew this line, and it isn't an exact demarcation, but it does help to understand the languages spoken in the region at that time. Greek was eventually forced out of much of the Eastern Roman Empire. In the 7th century, Egypt and the Levant were conquered by the Arabs, Anatolia and other regions of Eastern Rome were conquered by the Ottomans, and Constantinople became the new Turkish capital of Istanbul, making Turkish dominant there. So Greek today is primarily only spoken in Greece and Cyprus, with some other speakers scattered throughout the region. But what about north of the Jireček line? Well, the most significant demographic shift in European history took place, the Slavic migrations of the 6th century. During the 6th and even into the 7th century, people of early Slavic tribes in what is today Poland, Belarus, and Ukraine migrated throughout Europe, especially into the southern Balkan Peninsula. Why this migration occurred is a matter of speculation. Perhaps these were people who were forced to relocate by attacks from Central Asian nomads. Or perhaps there was a population explosion which led many people to settle in the sparsely populated lands surrounding them. We may never know the exact reasons, but what we do know is that over decades, a massive shift in population occurred, and with it a linguistic shift as well. Slavs settled in modern-day Czechia, Slovakia, Poland, Serbia, Bulgaria, and most other areas in the Balkans. Additionally, around 830 AD, the Magyar tribes migrated west from the plains area north of the Black Sea to the lower Danube, bringing their language with them. In English, we call the Magyars Hungarians. In case you're wondering, the Hungarian language is a Uralic language, completely unrelated to Latin, Germanic, or Slavic languages. Its closest linguistic relatives are Finnish and Estonian. This raises the obvious question. Why didn't Dacia become Slavicized? Why did a Latin-based language survive there? We may never know the exact reasons, but we can likely chalk this up to agricultural models. Looking at a topographic map of the Balkans, we can see that the largest mountain range here is the Carpathian mountain range. It seems that Slavic people tended to settle in low-lying regions along rivers, whereas higher elevations were controlled by the blocs, that is, speakers of Eastern Romance languages. In the area that is today Romania, it seems that when the Slavic expansion finished, the Vlachs had retained their language and identity and were strong enough to culturally dominate the lowlands surrounding them. It's worth noting that small pockets of other Eastern Romance languages exist in the Balkans besides Romanian. These notably include Istro-Romanian, Aromanian, and Megleno-Romanian. It seems that these languages simply haven't come to dominate the region, making them less notable than Romanian. In any case, over the centuries, the Latin language spoken in and around the Carpathians developed into what we now call today Romanian. That's not to say that Romanian has zero Slavic influence. Some 10 to 15% of Romanian words are Slavic in origin. In fact, for several centuries, the Romanian language utilized the Cyrillic alphabet. For example, the oldest surviving document in Old Romanian is a letter which uses the Romanian Cyrillic alphabet, but that changed with the modern standardization of Romanian. In 1780, Samuel Mikuclein, a Romanian Greek Catholic theologian, historian, and philosopher, wrote a book called Elementa Linguae Daco-Romane Sive Valachiae. In English, that's the elements of Daco-Romanian or Vlach language. He chose to write this book using the Latin alphabet. In this book, he compared modern Romanian to ancient Latin, and also codified modern Romanian grammar for the first time. This kicked off a re-Latinization of the language, and over the next century, Romanian language school textbooks were published, notable texts were transcribed into the Latin alphabet, and magazines and newspapers were printed in Romanian using the Latin alphabet. By the 1880s, the Latin alphabet had become standard across Romanian. Around the turn of the 20th century, a wave of Romanian nationalism discouraged bilingualism, and eventually Romanian became the official language of the Romanian Constitution of 1923. Something interesting I learned is that there are a couple of more outlandish theories about Romanian's origin. Some people claim that all Romance languages, including Latin, were born out of the Proto-Dacian language, not the other way around. And some Hungarians claim that there was never a Romanian language or even a Romanian people, and traces of Latin and Romanian come from Roman colonists who migrated from south of the Danube. Both of these theories arise from more extreme forms of nationalism in both countries, and neither have much if any evidence to support them. I haven't been able to find a single serious linguist who agrees with either, but don't let that stop you from arguing about it in the comments. Today, Romanian is the majority language in Romania and Moldova, and a minority of Romanian speakers are found in Ukraine, Hungary, Serbia, and Bulgaria as well. Some 23 million people speak Romanian as a first language. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something new. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let us know of any other topics we should make a video on.